Hello and welcome to the Inheritance Podcast. I'm Joe Riley, head of Circulus Group, family office network based in Greenwich, Connecticut. Jill Shipley is one of the most thoughtful people working today in the family wealth space. She has been working closely with substantial families for years and has many interesting takes on family unity, prenups, secrets and baggage, how to train wealth advisors, and what the show's Succession and Billions Get Wrong. Jill Shipley is Managing Director and Head of Family Governance and Education at AlTi Tiedemann Global. Prior to joining Tiedemann, Jill was a Senior Managing Director at Cresset Capital, leading the firm's governance and education practice, and prior acted as Managing Director in the Institute for Family Culture at Abbot Downing. Jill has been on the faculty with Stetson University's School of Business, where she taught courses on family business. She also served as an invited faculty member with the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton Executive Education Wealth Management Program. Jill holds both a BA and a bachelor's from Stetson University. Please enjoy my conversation with Jill Shipley.
This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Anything said by the guests or host should not be construed as legal or investment advice. Thanks for listening.
You studied business as an undergrad, but was that your first choice?
Yeah, so I grew up seeing the complexity around the overlap of family, business, and wealth. And I wanted to understand how it could be positive for all three of those, for the money, for the family, and for the business. So I actually chose Stetson because it was the only university in the country at the time that had a class in family business. So I ended up there.
You saw the overlap. What do you mean you saw the overlap?
Yeah, I think that the money is something we don't talk about. And such a large percentage of society, especially in the US, is connected to family business in some way. And we don't explore it. And we just talking about the family business program at Stetson, it was mind-boggling to me how many students, families owned a business. And we're never asked the question if, when, how, why you want to be involved. And then two, never took a business class or a family systems or psychology class. And so what a missed opportunity, even if you weren't going to work there. If you're going to be an owner, how do you gain the skills to navigate the dynamics in the family and then overlapped, like Christian Stewart talked about, I think so intelligently on your podcast, that Davis three-circle model, that when you have a family system that in this Venn diagram is touching a business system and an ownership system, where there's overlap is where it gets messy. And I think where we can do a lot to be helpful. And so I didn't use any of that language when I was a kid. I just saw the challenge and wanted to figure out a better way.
And did you have a career in mind?
No, I didn't even know this was a career. I don't even really know if 28 years ago it was, but I knew that I wanted to help people. I wasn't exactly sure what that was going to look like. But once I met Greg, I think his passion for family business, he'd launched the family enterprise program at Stetson and wanted a partner. And so we just played. We brought in the experts from the books on your bookshelf and built something that would be designed as a dual major, where you didn't have to study this, you didn't have to plan on working in your family business, but that you would learn these skills that we're talking about. You'd have to do an internship in a business that's not your family's. And so I just started teaching. It's wild to think about that at 21, I was in front of the room with the students rolling their eyes at what I was doing up there. But it was a wonderful experience. And I always make this joke that my mom is probably the only person that ever read my academic research. So I did not feel like academia could be the place for me forever.
Did you like teaching?
I love teaching, and I still feel like I get to do that. I just wanted to do it in a more multi-generational way. So the 18 to 24-year-old group was great, but I just felt like I could help by getting more involved in the generations. And so that's how I ended up at Asset Management Advisors, which then turned into GenSpring. And that's really where this work in the wealth management field began. And I was so inspired by Hap and Ellen Perry, were the founders of that firm. And Ellen is still such a role model, such a pioneer. She still inspires me. And I think they were really the first, at least from my perspective, to see in the financial world, to see that the soft stuff, what people called the soft stuff is really the most difficult. It's really hard. And we're willing to bring that into the financial business. And so from there, I feel like I just have continued to do the same thing over the past 2.5 decades.
Is there anything you can do at that age, the college age, to lay a good groundwork?
I'll try not to get on a soapbox, but I think two things. I think one, we do a terrible job teaching young people, rich or poor, how to manage their money. Hard stop. So I think we have a responsibility, an obligation to make financial literacy not just one class that barely anyone takes. So I think we have so much work to do to help people learn and practice personal money management so that we can succeed as a society. That's an aside. The second, I think, is who are you and how do you want that to manifest in your life? So I think the best thing we can do for college-age students is to help them reflect, pause. It's a time in your life where you have the white space to introspect on who am I, who do I want to be, and how do I want to take my skills and interests to do something positive and that people will pay for probably in society. And that's the best use of time in college. I think you learn how to learn. I think you learn how to navigate people, which are hard. So I think college is about maturing, learning how to learn, and really introspecting. And I think we'd be doing a service if every college student graduated with an understanding of their personality preferences, their Enneagram type, and their values and priorities.
What's a typical engagement like for you? Is there a typical engagement? How do you get your head around the family story and what they might need?
Yeah, my opinion is, and the work I do is with individuals who have more money than they're going to spend in their lifetime. So being really honest, I think focusing on more is not a goal. So if you're going to die with money, the question is why? What do you want it to do? And then to what end? So if the goal is preserve, grow, protect, my question would be to what end? Because you can't take it with you. So many people want to avoid giving to the IRS. So what do we do? What can we do now? So that's where I start. That's where I think all wealth managers who are dealing with multi-generational wealth should start. So I begin asking, what's the purpose of the money? And if you want to tell me your return expectation, fine. But we need to be asking follow-up questions that get to what do you really want and what do you want to avoid? So we can say preservation, growth, protection, but we can also say, I want to make sure my kids have quality education and healthcare and a roof over their head. We can say, I want them to have a quality of life that's a career they love, that's not dependent on their salary. I want them to travel. I want them to have the risk tolerance to start a business and a safety net. I want them to give back. I want to have an impact. Many people don't have children, or they do, and they still want to focus on not giving the money to the kids, but giving it to the community and engaging in impactful strategies in their investing. And I think that's where we need to start. So I think the problem or the challenge with wealth management firms is we speak a language we understand. And it's often what we can measure. But we need to be asking the question to every client, what is the purpose of your money? And then how can we design a strategy, a roadmap that is in service of what you said is important? We shouldn't have a values judgment about what it is, but we should understand it. And then that should drive all of our decision making. So that's where I start.
And then how do you know how much of the family to involve? And how do you get some sense of their background and the kind of context they're operating in? Because it can be very confusing, obviously, for somebody who just comes in for a short period of time.
So much to say here. I think that when you look at the research, the majority of wealth holders are first generation wealth creators that weren't raised with wealth. So they don't know what they don't know. And they often don't know their relationship with money. It's unconscious and is driving their decision making. And so our job, I think, is to ask good questions and then pause and allow for the silence for people to reflect on it. And for the most part, the conversation, people say, one, nobody's ever asked me the purpose of my money, which is wild. And two, my first instinct isn't true. So at the end of the day, if you have kids, often you want it to provide them a better life and you want them to be happy. You want them to be well. And so the wealth management business is using structures often driven by financial returns or tax mitigation that isn't going to accomplish that end. So I think starting with who are you? Tell me about your background. Tell me about your money history. Tell me about the lessons you learned, and then let's reflect on what are the ones you want to live going forward, and what are the ones you want to throw away? What's not serving you today? And then how can we design a evolving, changing, flexible model that starts with you, but then is expanded? Can I ramble for a minute about one of the myths in our field?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Many people might disagree with me on this, and I think that's okay. But my opinion is that our field has been focused on family unity, connectedness, togetherness, flourishing of the family first. And my opinion is it shouldn't start there. So you ask the question, who is the conversation with? Everyone, but in context of them as an individual. So my goal for our field is that we talk about individual well-being and individual flourishing first. I don't think the system, the family system, can thrive until you focus on the individual. And so I do think most of the books on my bookshelf are focusing on the family part. I think forced family doesn't work. If you open the door and focus on the individual, oftentimes people stay. But when you have no doors and they're in a locked room, which is the structures many of us are creating for families with a business or with a pot trust or with a family office, if there's no way out, you're just dying to get out. So my perspective is we start with the individual, we build a purpose statement, we get to know them and their money history and their values and their priorities for them and as an individual. And then we think about it for the couple, and then we think about it for the family. But at the end of the day, the family part's not going to work if we don't understand the individuals.
It's curious that you said that they feel trapped in these structures, but at the same time, that's what the industry does. And the families do need a structure. They need some way to deal with all their responsibilities. But you're touching on something more internal. It's a desire to have some sense of freedom.
Independence and interdependence, I think that's where we trip up. I think interdependence, especially if you have an operating business, you are born into interdependence and you're getting a message to be independent. And really, we're more if we differentiate. And that's hard to do when you're in an interdependent upbringing. And so I think my goal is to provide some flexibility within that framework. So sometimes there are locked doors, right? Just by the nature of an irrevocable structure. How can we create flexibility within that model? I think that's really important.
What are the common myths or misunderstandings?
Yeah, I have 4. That's the biggest one. And I think that's probably the most provocative in terms of our field, because we have really been a field on family. And I would like us to be first a field on individual, but that's my first. Second is, I think tied to this, is that you can't force people together. And I think often it's all good intentions gone bad. It's where parents or grandparents say, I want to keep my family close, right? I want to create unity and togetherness. And so I'm going to pass on a shared property that they'll love coming to and staying together for generations to come. Or I'm going to put my kids and grandkids on the board of a foundation, and they're going to love giving away money to causes they don't care about and aren't getting paid for, while I'm expecting them to do a full-time job. The forced togetherness piece, to me, our field, I think, often encourages these training grounds that can tear a family apart rather than achieve the goal of bringing them together. So I think giving an exit, I have an example of a client, this is extreme, but said, I'll pay for anyone in my family's home as long as they live within 5 miles of me. So forcing people to live your values doesn't create authentic connection. So number 2 is forced togetherness. Number 3 is, I think money doesn't automatically lead to happiness. I think we live in a society where most dream of being rich, but it is not all rosy. It comes with emotions, which we'll talk about probably throughout this conversation. But everybody says, it wouldn't be me. If I won the lottery, I would handle it well. And okay, fine, those people that are struggling with their wealth, they can give it to me, no problem. I can handle it. But it's hard. It's complicated, and it is a magnifier. So I think this idea that money solves your problems just isn't real, and it is a misperception. And then I think the 4th is that the irony of the word trust fund is almost the opposite of the beneficiaries feel like they're not trusted. So trust structures are created. What a weird word, right? That we're calling them trust when they make often the beneficiaries feel like they're not trusted. So I think that's a misperception that we have some work to do as a field. And I think we're doing it. Delaware passing that well-being statute, really trying to say, how can we create agency and autonomy in trust structures for the wellness of the beneficiary? I think it's beautiful, but we're still locked a little bit in a protect, control, avoid tax as the driver. And I think it really degrades trust.
Maybe actually, somewhat echoing those myths, is there a difference between stewardship and ownership?
Good question. Yeah. I think it's a difference in the way the words are interpreted. So I am not going to argue with you if you say you want your kids or grandkids to be stewards. I think getting underneath what you mean by that is really important. Because the way it feels to me and to many beneficiaries, it feels like there's this gold box that you want me to carry and protect, and then you want me to pass on the exact box or a better box to the next generation who does it to the next generation. It doesn't feel empowering. It can feel passive. It can feel like a burden. And I think the word ownership to me is way more inspiring. It's not passive, it's active. It's saying, how can we take the spirit of the wealth creator and own my power, my rights, my values, my priorities in aligning my actions with my values, with the mindset of the history of where the money came from. So it's not forgetting the wealth creator or the legacy, but it's not being tied down by it. So I think if we can shift, we don't necessarily need to change the words as much as I think change the definition. So I think stewardship can be empowering. It just often doesn't feel like that to the beneficiary, who feel afraid and stuck around how much power they have of what to do with it when they're asked to steward it versus asked to own it.
What do you think is the role of wealth in society?
Complicated one. I think that, especially today, I think that, like I said, money is something that most, especially in the US, dream of. But financial inequality leads us to have envy and often negativity. And I think the media doesn't help and social media doesn't help. So the media sensationalizes the rich being snobby and greedy and wasteful. And I think social media, you only see the opulence. You don't see the challenge or the complex. I love the saying that comparison is the thief of joy. And before social media, we just compared ourselves to our neighbors. Now we open our phones and we see a lifestyle that many will never get close to. And often the people that are showing it aren't close to it. But it leads to deep-rooted negativity. And I think, especially in today's society, being part of the 1% can be heavy. It can feel like a burden, especially if you didn't earn it. So I think we have an opportunity. My experience with the wealthy doesn't fit the stereotype. My experience is that the wealthy clients I work with, they want their money to do good. They want it to do more than grow and protect for generations to come. They want it to have a positive impact on their family and on their communities. And so I think we need to do a better job in terms of the stereotype and the perception, because I do think money can create really positive change. And that's why I work in this field. I think I can make the biggest difference by helping the wealthiest in the world to think more deeply about what they want their money to do for them in the community, and they want to engage in that way. And so I think it's unfortunate, the stereotype, and I don't think that the television shows like Succession or The White Lotus, Billions, even the housewives of every city, we are not portraying the wealthy in the way that I see them.
Do your clients feel that separation?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, especially because for the most part, many of them didn't grow up with wealth. So I know Jim Grubman in his book, Strangers in Paradise, you're not born in the land of wealth. So all of a sudden, you want to provide your kids a better life. So you blood, sweat, tears, sacrifice to put food on the table. And now it leads you to another stratosphere where you're in a culture that you don't understand the language or the values or the behaviors, and you don't know who to trust. So I think the majority of our clients, there's many opportunities. I'm not discounting the security, the freedom, options. And if you're in poverty, it's really hard. So I'm not discounting that. And I'm saying that there's way more complexity than just the rosy when it comes to having more than your peers, and ones that look at you as if you have no right to have any problems, especially if you didn't earn it.
I want to ask you some questions about your role. I'm interested in what sort of competencies someone in your position needs. What makes a good wealth advisor?
These are maybe silly examples, but I think emotional intelligence more than ever. I think a willingness to say, I don't know, a willingness to sit with emotion and silence, which is really hard. I think knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know and having a team of people or resources that you can bring in when you're not the right person. I think stereotypically our advisors think they need to know it all. And I don't think we're doing clients a service by behaving that way. And so I think some of the qualities are shifting to be where we have more competency around the emotion and more comfort in it.
Is it something that can be taught?
Nature and nurture. I think for some people, this just comes more easily. Our personality preferences. We were born this way. And I think, yes, absolutely. You can learn motivational interviewing. You can learn appreciative inquiry. You can learn through practice.
What appreciative inquiry?
Learning how to ask questions and really listening to the answers. Back to my soapbox about financial literacy. We talk over each other. We are planning the next thing we're going to say. And to do this job, that doesn't work. We need to hear underneath the words. And that takes training and practice. And it comes more easily for some than others. But yeah, we can learn.
Do you think the industry does a good job of training folks?
No. Do you? We're getting better. We have more programming. So I think we're trying. Gosh, 20 years ago, we had nothing. We had a couple books on the bookshelf. Now we actually have models and programs. And I think that the part of what I'd really like to see is more integration, less silos. So I think that we need to see the magic in the overlap of the areas of expertise or subject matter that we bring to the table. A great example is in trust and estate planning, that I sit down with a client and say, tell me what you want your wealth transfer to achieve. And they tell me all about it. And then I read their documents and none of it aligns. So it was written by somebody that didn't ask the question of what you wanted to achieve. And it's a beautifully efficient, in terms of tax mitigation, document. But is it going to empower generations that you haven't met? No. Is it going to give freedom and agency, which we know you need to feel like an adult? No. And so I think having an estate planning attorney in the room with a family dynamic expert, the conversation totally changes. And so we can say, what can we do legally to achieve your objectives? And then what can we do? How can we ask the follow-up question to understand what you really want the outcome to be for the people that are going to be impacted by the document, not just the IRS. And I think that's the magic. So many trusted and estate attorneys say, gosh, I wish I would have been asking those deeper questions because it would have saved us from the lawsuit down the road, the conflict down the road. And I think we're getting better, but we have a ways to go.
So you brought up a lot of issues that families faced. I'm interested on your side of the table. How do you and your firm make the best use of your time? You can't talk to everybody.
Yeah, it's a hard one. I think that it's a wonderful problem to have. When I was at AMA or GenSpring, I was begging his advisors to talk to me about this. It was, you're the touchy-feely person, and I don't want the touchy-feely stuff. Now people are knocking on my door. And so it's a wonderful shift in the industry. And it's hard. It is hard to engage with clients in the way that they're open to or that they need. Joe, one of the challenges I see, I don't know if you experience this, is if something's not on fire, it's hard to prioritize it. And so almost everyone says, I care about this. I want to educate my kids. I want to educate myself. I want to create governance structures and decision-making frameworks. And I want to hold multi-generational meetings. And then life just gets in the way. And if it's not on fire, it's hard to focus on it. And so I often get called in, ideally to start the conversation around purpose. Let's get that straight first. And let's make sure everything we're doing ties back to what you said your purpose was. And then, truthfully, it's just in time. When there is a question, a challenge, I'm the call. And I think popping in and spending an hour with you, I've had the same conversation about the same issue with 100 other people. So there's not a right answer, but I've seen the good, bad, and the ugly in the outcome and lots of examples, right? I'm struggling with my trustee. I'm struggling with my fiance. I'm struggling with my sibling. Just talking that through. Here's some ideas. Have you thought of this? Have you tried this approach? Here's some questions you could ask, some solutions you could try. In an hour, often, I think I can make a significant difference. And I do also a lot of multi-generational family meetings, which is deep and complex work. But those one-off topic-focused consultation calls often are the most impactful.
What is that deep and complex work like?
Oh, I think we begin with confidential one-on-one interviews with each family member to know what are your goals, values, priorities, learning style, fears, concerns, questions. Have that process with everyone, and then we come back. That's the first step and say, here's what we learned. So I think it's a pretty consistent consultative model where we report back anonymously, here are the themes, and here's what we recommend to help you achieve your family shared goals or your individual goals. And then we develop a strategy, which almost always involves ongoing facilitated conversations around a variety of different topics. So whatever it is, if there's an operating business, that often, and a group of owners or a board or a council, then we're creating these structures and designing charters and then implementing them. If it's an investment committee or oversight for a family office, and it's facilitating those conversations to help enable shared decision making. Oftentimes it's even deciding what the criteria are for the folks that are going to sit on the oversight board, and then helping them to make decisions on behalf of the rest of the family, especially as the family grows. But it looks different with every family, but the agendas, ideally we're working on at least an annual basis where we're bringing the family together. If there are a lot of decisions that need to be made, we need to do it quarterly.
Like a day-long meeting?
Yeah, a day or two. I think often it's really cool to be able to have a half day the first day and then let people sleep on it. It's pretty funny how things change overnight.
How do you organize these meetings? Do you front load them with the major issues, or do you try to find a way to smooth it out?
I do not load them with the major issues, especially for the first few. People are scared. It takes bravery to get in a room. Okay, I'll just say this. Some families struggle to get together on Thanksgiving. Okay, families are hard. Even if you don't have any decisions you have to make together. So I think we got to ease into this. So I think practicing in a safe way around safe topics at the beginning makes a lot of sense. So let's learn how we communicate, how we negotiate, how we navigate conflict, or not even conflict, but misunderstandings or disagreements. And so I think the more we can ease people in to the deep, tough, heavy is really helpful. But I work with some families where we're already in the muck and we just are there all the time because we did the upfront work to practice. I have another misperception. This is also one that I don't know if folks are going to love, that I don't think we don't need a family constitution for every client. The over orchestrating of governance for the most part is just unnecessary. Most families don't need 7 governance bodies. We don't need to overcomplicate things. I don't believe in a decision tree to decide what your constitution should entail. I think we need to try to keep it as simple as we can, especially for keeping the next generation and the next generation in mind. Passing on extreme complexity, when you understood it, but your kids or grandkids don't, it's unfair. It's a burden. So I am a fan of what do we really need? And let's focus there. So I think the field, we can get caught up in our terminology and our models in a way that often doesn't help the family. So I try to keep it simple.
Where does the business end and the family begin?
Do you think it does? I think in a first generation, second generation family, boundaries are really hard to put up and keep and respect. It's hard not to just talk about it over the dinner table. So I think as you get to 3rd, 4th, 5th, you have 100 family members, you have professional management, you have a board, then the business operates. It's not ending, but the family can do family stuff and sometimes talk about business stuff. I think early on in your evolution, it's really hard to separate and hold boundaries between the family and the business. So I don't know if it ends.
What's your advice on when and how to communicate to heirs about wealth?
Often, early and often. That's a cheesy answer. I think if you were to say, what's the one thing you can do? Take one thing away from this conversation. It's talk about the stuff, especially when it's hard. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. So I think the more we talk about this is weird, right? How many of our peers are going to family meetings or even meeting with professionals, know what a family office is? It's an unspoken, bizarre thing that a very small percentage of people in society have to deal with or have an opportunity to deal with. And I think that's where we start. What do we communicate when and how is always from the beginning to say, this is weird. You're different than many of your peers. And you're probably going to hear things from your peers as a young kid. I have a great story of an 8-year-old I was working with, came back from spring break, did a little activity at the school she was going to, came back crying. So I got on a Zoom with her. She's just bawling and said, Jill, I lied at school today. I'm like, oh, honey, what happened? And she said, we had to fill out this report about what we did over spring break. And one of the questions was, if you traveled, what airline? And I said American Airline. And I flew on my family's plane. And I just hate to lie, but I just felt like I didn't want to I felt like I would be bragging if I said that. I think that we need to be having conversations, even with very young people, that not everyone has the privilege, the opportunities in the life that we do. And there are time and a place to talk about it or post it on social media, and that you can make people feel uncomfortable. It can feel like bragging, and to understand that secrecy versus confidentiality, those are different things. And that's a hard thing for a kid to understand. So when and how do you talk? I think we start from the beginning of, we're in a very lucky and privileged position that we've worked very hard for and sacrificed for, and it provides us opportunities. And we should talk about how it's different than the people that you're surrounded by and how it could impact your relationships with them. But then we should also talk about the details. I've never had someone say, you told me too early about the money or the way it was going to impact me. And I have had so many people say, you told me too late, be resentful. And with the expanded life that we have, now we're dealing with 70-year-olds that haven't told their 50-year-old kids, who have 30-year-old kids, who have their own kids. So we need to be having these conversations early. I think the model of inheritance being something that you do when you die is not my recommendation. I think when you're 70, you have a lot less need for the support, the financial assistance than you did when you were 40. So I think waiting until you die, even for your giving, people that are holding on to their money. I have a client that's giving away $10,000 a year, and they have an $80 million net worth, and they're in their 80s. So what are you going to do with it when you're gone? And how much more fun would it be to give it away now and get to see the people that benefit from it, enjoy it, whether that be your family or that be people in the community and the world. And so I think the more that we can talk about it and the more that we can drip, I think this is a Jolene Godfrey concept, that you drip both knowledge and practice. Let's give a little bit of money now and over time, adding dollars to it so that your first access to a lot of zeros, because what do you do when you first get money? You do something stupid. So let's make the mistake with smaller zeros so you can learn from the mistakes or the experience, the outcome, and be prepared. I think it is scary to talk about your mortality. It's scary to talk about, parents are worried, right? If I tell my kids about their inheritance, how's that going to impact their motivation and their work ethic and their relationships with the people in their lives? And so I'm just not going to tell them. But then they're not ready. They're not learning what they need to learn to be prepared. So I think we don't have to open up our portfolio or our net worth statement when you're 14. But I think over time, we should be dripping access to money if you're going to be getting an inheritance and access to information.
Do you think money destroys motivation?
I think it depends on how you define motivation. I think often our clients think success is only on financial metrics. And I think many people are motivated and don't make any money or make little money. No, I think ideally we're encouraging from a very young age that success is as you define it. And as long as you get off the couch, I've never met a happy person that has no reason to get off the couch, never. So we need a reason to get off the couch. But I don't care if that's a stay-at-home parent or a volunteer or you're in a band, but you need a reason to get off the couch. And I think money, if you have an inheritance, your salary is often not the driver for what you do. And that's awesome. But we got to encourage you to find the thing that makes you want to get off the couch. So the challenge is when you're in your 20s and 30s, if you love to golf for fun, nobody else can do that with you every day. So we need a purpose that is more than just messing around. And so I think it does help to feel like you did something hard, the achievement that you get, the self-worth that you get from trying something hard and accomplishing it is really worthwhile. And I think if we can encourage motivation for that, doesn't have to be motivation for a bigger bank account though.
How can you prevent sibling conflicts before the founding couple dies?
I think siblings are the only people that we have in our lives, typically forever, that we didn't pick. So the fact that we think it should be easy is unrealistic. Genetics don't guarantee that you're going to be best friends with your siblings. You're just often different people. You probably have some aligned values and interests, and you're raised by the same parents in some cases. But to think that you're going to get along because of that and work well together is absurd. So how do you help? You engage them. You talk to them about what your plans are. I think this whole idea of what is fair versus what is equal is so important when we're talking to wealth creators or wealth holders about how to protect the sibling relationships after they're gone. Because everybody has their own mindset about what is fair or what is equal. So we need to tell our kids before we're gone what we were thinking. Because otherwise the kids they have nobody else left to blame after you're gone. So they blame each other. My recommendation is give siblings an opportunity to be autonomous, to support each other. Do not force them into shared decision-making. An operating business is a little different because it's a structure. We should have an exit option in every situation. But in some cases, you're somewhat forced into a room. But giving people a chance to practice, giving people an out, and really talking and engaging them. I have two stories I'll tell you quickly, Joe. One, a same family tree. So you have parents that have 3 kids. In each of the situations, one of the kids has done far better financially than their other 2 siblings in terms of their income. And in one of the cases, the parents sat the kids, in both cases, the parents sat the kids down and said, here's what we're thinking in terms of our wealth transfer. And in one of the cases, the sibling that has way more than his other siblings said, I don't want any of your money. My sister has a special needs kid. I don't need it. Just give it to them. I don't want it. Okay. The parents can still do whatever they want to do. It's their decision. But having the conversation can change everything. The other family, exactly the same scenario. In this case, it was the daughter that had more. She said, why would you penalize me for having more financial success? Why would I have less financial resources than my siblings? Because often money is tied to a sense of love. So do you love them more? Why would you penalize me? And in that case, what a great conversation to learn, no, we absolutely do not want you to feel that way. So that changed the way they went about their estate planning. And in the other case, the son said to his siblings, in front of his siblings, no, I want you to have it. And I'm comfortable with that, rather than them feeling the guilt that they got more than him. All the unspoken dynamics that can come up after the parents are gone, you can avoid. I even think that with silly things like your family heirlooms. I had a family fight over a pillow that I told my mother I wanted that pillow, and she gave it to my sibling. She must have loved my sibling more. How absurd. So we just need to have these conversations earlier. And what happens is that sibling's mad at their sibling. Not only the legacy and the memory of their parents, but they're fighting with each other. And so let's avoid that. And there's lots of ways to do it, but you don't have to guarantee that they're going to be best friends. It's okay if they're not, but we can hopefully get to a place where they're not suing each other.
How can you do that?
Through these kind of conversations that are early and often. And I think practicing having hard conversations makes it possible when stuff comes up. I believe in conflict. I think conflict means you care. If you're not fighting, if you're not struggling, you've given up. So I think we're going to disagree, but let's practice how we're going to do that, how we're going to negotiate and mitigate the challenge. But let's do that when it's safe rather than when it's lawsuit worthy.
What about your thinking on prenups?
I think prenups are really hard. I think you're basically asking a couple to plan for their divorce while they're planning for their marriage. So by nature, they're hard. And I think they raise conversations that we all should be having before we get married. So we all have a different money history. I've never met a couple that are exactly financial equals. So we're all coming to our marriages unequal. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about why we think about money the way we do and our habits and attitudes. Let's talk about what do we want to have happen if our relationship doesn't work out or if one of us passes away prematurely. Let's decide so that the state doesn't decide. And I think it's really healthy. And often, in some cases, you realize we're not very aligned. So I'd way rather find that out before we get married than a few years in. I don't think the document is the key. I think it's the conversation that's the key. I also think that we need to be careful that we're not blaming it on our parents. It is a really challenging way to start out with your in-laws when you think they think you're a gold digger. So I think many times it's easy to say my parents or grandparents are forcing this. How's your significant other going to feel about them? So let's talk about it's a business. We have a business rationale. We hope our house doesn't burn down and we get insurance just in case it does. And let's talk about it. Let's make it where it feels equitable, right? We're not going to have equality, but how can we go into this marriage as partners? And there are a lot of strategies to accomplish that, but it takes proactive conversation. And another big one, Joe, is never meet with an attorney first. And it's such a big mistake because who's the attorney representing? You, often your parent or grandparent. And so you're starting out in a fight. So I have conversations once a week, at least with couples. I have a conversation with each party separately to understand what do they hope for, what are they worried about? And most of the time, what are the myths that they think about prenups that aren't true? And then we come together and say, what do you want? What are you really trying to achieve with this prenup? And let's get an outline together that then you take to the attorney. So it's not the attorney driving it based on them protecting everything in the most strict way, which is only going to cause an argument. Let's go together, not to the attorney, but let's start with a document that we created together about what we want to achieve. And let's make sure the document does it, if we're going to get one. In some cases, trusts already provide the protection that is required. It's just the distributions. How do we handle the distributions? I think attorneys would say you need a double layer of protection. So the prenup is helpful, even if there are trust structures in place. I don't know if you always need them, but I think it's really important to have the conversation and the disclosure. Because, geez, to be 5 years into your marriage and find out there's millions, hundreds of millions of dollars that you aren't going to have access to or is going to be impacting your lifestyle, I think that could be really damaging to the relationship. So I go into every prenup conversation saying, my job is not to protect your money. It's to protect your relationship. And it just changes the conversation.
How do you deal with secrets in a family?
I'll be really honest. I think every family has baggage. I think secret, I don't like the word. I think we have a voice inside of our head that's probably better if people aren't hearing. So we're all keeping secrets all the time. So I think the word secret is a word I don't like to use, but I like to say every family has baggage. If it is getting in the way of us moving forward, we need to unpack it. If not, lock it up in the trunk and move on. We don't need to unpack when I was 3 and you stole my truck. We don't need to. Some people need to go back and do therapy on those things, but only if it's holding you back. So I do think everybody has baggage. Some of it's left locked up in the trunk, and that's where it should stay. And if it's getting in the way, if it's an elephant in the room, then let's get some help to unpack it.
So circling back a little bit to your work back at Stetson, because I think Greg McCann at the time was doing a big thing on leadership. I think it was leadership ability or leadership agility.
Agility.
And I'm curious, with your own experience these years working with families, if you have any advice for spotting leadership qualities in the family, or perhaps should everybody learn some?
Yeah, everybody should learn some. And I think it goes back to what I said about success. Leadership, stereotypically in our clients, is about who's the most capable to be the successor. And that's not what I think about when I think about leadership. I think everybody has potential to be a leader in something. And I think if we can broaden what's valuable, what matters, what success looks like, to say, you can be the successor or the leader and focus on our family history or focus on our togetherness. Like, you can plan our family vacation every year, but we value that like we value the chairman of the family office oversight board or the secretary of the family council. I think especially when it comes to financial metrics, like the investment person or people often are ones that are seen as leaders, and they often don't have the strongest leadership qualities. And it's in one narrow silo when I think families need somebody to be a leader in their giving, in their family togetherness, in their learning. So I love having somebody chair the education committee for the family. So I just think there's a lot of ways you could be a leader, and I think we're a little narrow in our definition. And then what are the qualities? I think we could teach people how to be stronger leaders. And so I think everybody benefits, all of us, rich or poor, to learn how to be a stronger leader. So I think the crucial conversations, I think leadership agility, I think there's a lot of models. I think there's a movement toward this EQ in leadership, and I think we all benefit from learning it.
I love this article you wrote a few years ago about succession. And the only reason I bring it up is because succession itself has become shorthand for family dysfunction. I don't think a day goes by that I don't see it in the Journal or in the Financial Times. And it's certainly any business school that you go to.
Yeah.
But I'm curious as to how you would have solved the Roy's family problems.
Yeah, I would have told them to sell Waystar years ago. The level of dysfunction, it's a totally sensationalized example. And in this sensationalized example, I struggled to see, given the modeling that Roy did and the way that he was pitting his children against each other, I struggled to see that ever working. So I think the family system would have been better served by not having the business. So I would have told them to sell it.
Do you think they would have listened to you?
I think no. And I think I don't like using fear as a motivator, but this is a train wreck that you were watching happen in real time. And so if you can give people a heads up to say, I see this train wrecking, but it's going to happen in stages. If you tell them early, when the first or second stage hits, they might call. So they might shut you down at the beginning. But once there's a crisis or a sucking chest wound, people say, remember that woman who said this was going to happen? Maybe we should call her and see if she can help us. So I want to get ahead of it. I want to intervene early if I can. I don't know if Roy would have listened. I wonder if his kids or their kids would. And I think it would be worth trying. I think most people, the kids didn't seem very happy with their dynamic or their relationship with their father. So if you were to say, I think I can help you to work on that, I think most of them might have said, let's try. Tell me more. And that's a place to start. And if not, maybe the next generation.
So there's no future for the Roy kids?
Oh, there's a future. It just might not be a happy one that makes them feel well and full of self-esteem. They all seem to be really struggling as humans, as individuals. And I didn't get the sense many of them were happy. And not just about the family business, but about themselves and their lives. So I think everybody can, if they're willing to do the work, everybody can change. I didn't exactly get the sense they were open to it. I don't know if they had a lot of people that were trying to help them, but I wonder what it could have looked like to say, I've seen this play before, and let me tell you how it tends to work out, and give you some tips on some things you could try that might shift the outcome.
No, I think actually I'm remembering now, I think the family dynamics person in that, I think he got injured or thrown in the pool or something like that. It was a total fiasco. They tried to have a family meet. Do you remember that?
Yeah. I even appreciate the fact that they brought somebody in, but you have to want to change. And I think in that case, and in many cases, like Billions, I think is similar. If you have the key leader, decision maker, authoritarian dictator hiring the person, you're already going to lose. You need somebody that everybody picked if they're going to come in and really try to change the system. So if dad's person is facilitating the meeting, we lost. It's better than nothing, but it's, in my experience, not going to work as well as if we had everybody interview two people and then bring it to the group and then they vote.
Billions, another show that was somewhat cartoonish, but there were still some lessons there. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we need to plan proactively. I think in all of these situations, as I said before, I really I'm uncomfortable with the extreme negativity toward wealth and the wealthy. I think Yellowstone, I think there's just a lot of exaggerated behavior that is portrayed in the media that I think we need to get away from. I don't see it, I think is real. I think that there's, and I'm not sure if this is in billions, but the dementia, Alzheimer's that we are facing given our longevity and our healthcare today is something we need to be focusing far more on. I think we need a just-in-case plan. We don't just need a succession plan. We need a just-in-case, a contingency plan. As an example, this might not be exactly tied to your question about the show, but I just love doing a fire drill. Basically coming in a room and saying, the key decision maker, go sit in the corner and pretend you're not here. Now I'm going to tell you a scenario that just happened. There was a car wreck and he's or she's incapacitated. What do? Let's play out the steps today, tomorrow, next week, next year. And 99.9% of the time, they just look at the person like, help, because there's been no communication, no preparation. It's a wonderful way to highlight how important it is and how little your family knows about what you want or what the plan is. So I think we need to be doing this proactive work before we need it. So the planning for the unexpected, but also for the incapacitation. I've seen too many families struggle with the senior person that wants to hold on to the control of the reins that has lost their capacity. And it's very hard to take the keys away from your parent or grandparent when they don't think they need to give them up. So I think having a plan in place, having an agreement that's signed, that there's a board, if a family member or a key employee is scared that they may be losing their capacity, that we have at least 2 doctors do tests. And if there is concern over capacity, we have somebody overseeing and watching it. But that we have a plan is the point. And that happened in succession where they didn't do that. But once you start to lose capacity, you tend to hold on tighter to the reins. And that's not going to serve anybody.
Jill Shipley, thank you for joining us and sharing your wonderful insights.
It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for listening. If you like the podcast, please share it with your friends and take a minute to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We appreciate it.
The views expressed herein are those of Jill Shipley and do not necessarily reflect the views of AlTi Global Incorporated or its affiliates. This is for informational purposes only and does not constitute investment advice, an offer to buy or sell any financial product, a solicitation to become an advisory client of AlTi or an investor in any AlTi-advised fund, or an endorsement of AlTi, its advisory services, or investment strategies, including AlTi-advised funds. While the information and views presented are believed to be accurate and expressed in good faith, there is no assurance that they are correct, complete, or will not change over time. All investments carry risk, including loss of principal. Past performance is not indicative of future results.